When we first came up with the original concept of having a tourism symposium in Liverpool, it really was to recognise the fact that culture and tourism needed to be brought together. And one of the ambitions we had was to be the first event in this important international festival of business, which we've achieved, to bring people from cultural and tourism backgrounds together to discuss issues of the moment and to enjoy it at the same time.
We've had an amazing morning so far, and we've got lots of fiery debate already starting. So Tourism Society is really leading the debate and the discussion and thought leadership around the importance of tourism, the arts and culture in creating economic success.
My name's Chris McCabe, I'm a poet. It's been a fabulous day here at the Tourism Symposium. All kinds of language used to describe Liverpool's changing culture. I've even created a detective for the occasion. It's been a fabulous day and long may it go on. Thank you.
Great opportunity to hear about tourism and culture coming together and what's going on around the country, and always great to be in Liverpool and hear about their achievements. Great day.
Today's symposium has just been a wonderful mix of expert speakers covering almost every aspect you could think about.
Yeah, it's been a great day. It's been good the way tourism and culture have been brought together. Some brilliantly erudite speeches and really good analysis of the economic and social impact. So long may this continue, and well done the Tourism Society.
I think we've really achieved quite a lot with this symposium, all of the ambitions we started off with, and I'm extremely proud of the event, the help we've had from Liverpool and the team who put it together.
Well, thank you, Sandra, and thank you. It's not often that I'm asked to follow John Lennon, but I will do my best. I'm going to speak for 10 or 15 minutes, and then I'm really keen to answer questions or observations from you. I'm just going to do you a quick 5-minute riff on the two organisations that I'm now involved in, and then make some remarks about the state of the creative industries, the state of tourism, and most importantly, the state of cultural tourism, which is the synergy of the two. And I'll speak as David Cameron and Ed Miliband try to do, without notes for as much as possible. So back in 2008, after being in journalism in various incarnations for quite a few years, I received a cold call from headhunters saying there is an organisation called Turner Contemporary, and would I be interested in putting my name forward to chair it? And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I think you probably are labouring under a state of mistaken identity. She said, no, I'll get back to you and I'll find out. I said, well, that's fine, but you have to understand, I have never had anything to do with an artistic cultural organisation before. I've never been to Margate, and I've never sat on a board. To which they said, well, that'll do nicely. My mum came from Chatham, but as our large Kent contingent knows, that might as well be from Mars, East Kent and West Kent. So I went with the family on May Day 2008, a beautiful sunny day. There was a small arts festival called Margate Rocks going on at the time, and I just found the first place in this alien territory to park the car, which was right by the sea, in a rather desultory car park covered with weeds. That turned out to be the site of Turner Contemporary. Fast forward a few months, we created a board. We had a ground-laying ceremony in November 2008, which was the day of our first board meeting. The idea had been, for those of you who may be familiar with the story, there had been a first aborted attempt to build a gallery out in the sea earlier in that decade, which had been given up amid some acrimony. The local council, Kent County Council, and the Arts Council both bravely and inspiringly said, yes, there had been a problem first time around, let's put out the governance to an independent trust, but we're not going to give up on it, even though local public opinion had quite understandably grown really quite hostile, given that a lot of people had had their fingers burnt, businesses had opened, tourist-oriented businesses had opened, and then the gallery didn't open. So, fast forward 2.5 years later, on time, on budget, the gallery opened in April 2011. There was one day in between times when it was under scaffolding, and I was in a taxi going from one place to another, and this taxi driver, we all have taxi driver stories, but this one was one of my favourite. He turned round and he said to me, I hadn't mentioned what I was doing or anything, he said, mark my words, mate, in 5 years' time, that's going to be a benefits office. So, I said nothing, smiled sweetly, because I needed to get to my destination, which wasn't the benefits office. And when I was paying my fare, I started doing some finger jabbing on this taxi driver. And I said, the way you just talked to me, the way you just slagged off your local environment, the way you just dissed and sought to denigrate what is going to be a fabulous new cultural destination, not just for your town, but for your county, for the country internationally. The person who's really going to lose out is you. You're going to lose out more than me. I can up sticks and go elsewhere. You, because you've slagged it off, because you have a negative frame of mind, you just imagine you have some Italians, you have some Germans, you have some French in your taxi, and you talk about your local environment in that way. They won't come again. Your time in the queue at the train station will have just grown longer. Your bottom line will be harmed. Cut a long story short, the guy did agree to come to the gallery when it opened and became a strong supporter with his family. But it took a lot of manual work with some people, and in some respects it can be understood because, not to put too fine a point on it, for the previous 30 or 40 years nothing in that town had ever worked. And if you had been brought up in an environment in which the public realm was a story of consistent failure, it is a story that was particularly acute there, but it's a story that pertains to many of our seaside towns with the advent of package holidays and the like that fell to rack and ruin. It was not without justification that he thought, if nothing has effectively ever worked in the public realm, why should this? But this did. We had 4 days, and some of you here were part of that. We had 4 days of launches in April 2011. We had more two-way, that's live interviews, from the Sky Sat Truck than was happening in one particular day from Libya when the conflict was going on. We had saturation coverage, and we immediately set our sights extremely high. Just over 2 years later, we welcomed our 1 millionth visitor, putting a gallery that is not particularly large in a town that you wouldn't bump into. You would have to make a beeline to go to one of the biggest, one of the most attended galleries outside London in England. And that was done predominantly by innovative curatorial work from our fantastic director, Victoria Pomery, who sadly can't be here, but her deputy Richard, where's Richard? There he is. The deputy director is here. Victoria will be here tomorrow for the launch of Tate Liverpool's excellent show, Mondrian show, which Turner Contemporary is doing an earlier Mondrian show, and the two organisations have worked closely together. It worked, Turner Contemporary, and it's by no means unique, and I want to name check a number of visual arts and other organisations around the UK that have done extremely well themselves because of a recipe of innovation and of ambition and ambition at every step of the way. The first thing I said to the team, and I said to our board, is that we will ban the R word. Any guesses for what the R word might be? Nope. Regional. We will never be a regional art gallery. We are a national and international art gallery. This is one of Britain's great problems. I mean, I'm a through and through Londoner, and I'm extremely proud so to be. And even though I say it here, I'm a Chelsea long-time supporter as well. I absolutely admire our national and international artistic, cultural institutions in the nation's capital. Long may they thrive. There is absolutely no zero sum about the international success of our nation's capital. That said, there is absolutely every reason, as there is in countries such as Germany and the United States, which are both, I think, the best models in this regard, for many of our major towns and cities to have arts, cultural, creative and tourist destinations that are truly global. We must be geography blind in this country. If you are a great theatre or art gallery in Hamburg or in Munich, or if any of you have been to the Art Institute in Chicago, would you say any of these are not international destinations? Of course they are. There is a lack of ambition nationally among our policymakers that always believe that, with some notable exceptions, artistic, cultural and tourist destinations somehow need to be supported from the centre, rather than thinking, what can our great institutions outside London deliver for the international locus that is Britain? And talking to colleagues who are part of the Great Britain campaign, which, as many of you know, is part of the UKTI's, the Department of Biz's, selling of Britain abroad, which is all about our creative, our cultural, our tourism vibe around the world. And it is absolutely vital that people see London as being a great global city, which it is, but they see Britain and all its various parts of it as being many, many parts of this wonderful whole. And no matter where you are in this country, and it is not necessarily a matter of scale, you do not have to be of a huge size to be an international destination. So that's enough, and I'm happy to talk about any aspects of the Turner Contemporary phenomenon. I just talk very briefly about why I came about establishing a new organisation. We're only 3 months into it, called the Creative Industries Federation. End of last summer, I was approached by the likes of John Sorrell, who used to run the Design Council, who's one of Britain's UKTI ambassadors, Peter Bazalgette from the Arts Council, Nick Sirota from the Tate, Nick Heitner from the National Theatre, Caroline Rush from the British Fashion Council, Amanda Neville from the British Film Institute, and Tony Hall from the BBC, and others, and said, Britain needs a single, loose, federative voice to speak for our arts and cultural organisations and our commercial creative industries. It is a curiosity that when you listen to our politicians, and it could be David Cameron, it could be Gordon Brown in China or India, they will wax lyrical about our creative industries. During his visit to China last autumn, the Prime Minister was asked on a Weibo social media chat, question number one wasn't about politics or economics, but it was, when is the next episode of Sherlock coming on TV? And this was quite a moment for him, the next series, I mean. He will talk about Doctor Who, he will talk about Burberry, he will talk about our music industry, he will talk about our great galleries and our great theatres and opera houses when he is abroad. What do our government ministers and others in the public realm do when they come back to Britain? They somehow become tongue-tied. they somehow become hamstrung, proselytizing, sending exactly the same message about what it is that is making modern contemporary Britain great. It is hugely the creative industries in all their manifestations. We know the figures. The rate of employment growth for the creative industries is currently running at 6 times the overall economic job rate growth. The rate of actual economic growth for the creative industries is running 2.5 times the national average. The case is surely incontrovertible. Hearts and minds have surely been, or should, with enlightened national and local government, be won. The economic case is still extremely difficult, really, to drive home. So that is why we agreed to set up our putative organisation. It will be a national membership organisation that will be advocacy, representative, lobbying work. We will also do research and aggregate others' research, and we will be an offline and online networking opportunity. We want to bring, there are approximately 300,000 creative entities, which is a strange word, in this country. That is individuals to a 2-person dance studio, to Warner Brothers, to Sony, to Paul Smith, to any of our creative companies. We need to find synergies, we need to find a conversation that unites the for-profit commercial part of our creative industries with the publicly endowed and mixed economy public artistic cultural organizations. The idea that the two are operating in entirely separate, hermetically sealed worlds is true in some respects in the practice, but it shouldn't be true because the common interests are vast. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago where the chief designer of Jaguar cars, it was an arts and business awards evening, and he said, this car wouldn't be as great as it is if it weren't for the design schools that had produced the designers that can do this. You look at the art schools, you look at the state of our creative education over the last 10, 20, 30 years. It is the people who have come out of those institutions over the last few decades who are now in their early or middle age, who are driving the leadership of our creative industries. If we neglect our creative education, then Britain's leading role in the creative economy globally, recognizes globally, but we mustn't be complacent. The idea, we are now currently very much out there in the lead in these industries. The idea that we are going to stay there, you look at the challenge of the gaming industry in Korea, the fashionistas will tell you the challenges from all manner of different countries, not least from Asia. In every sector, we are being challenged to be at our very best, to be constantly innovating. None of that will be achieved without local and national public investment alongside entrepreneurship. And that is why ambition is so absolutely key. One of the most important aspects of this, along with bringing the commercial sector together with the public artistic sector, is also bringing the nation together to break down this London versus the rest rather hackneyed discussion. I'm sorry I wasn't at the Cavern last night, but I was with TV and film independent producers in Manchester at the end of a fantastic day of, I think, 12 different meetings from TV and film to visual arts to architecture to the Chamber of Commerce and many others besides. From everything I have seen and the initial conversations I've had, it seems that in Manchester and in Liverpool, separately and jointly, and obviously in the other parts of Manchester, Salford and elsewhere, there is some really enlightened local government and some really enlightened, in the best sense, planning. You just need to go to Salford Quays and Media City to see what's going on there. You need to see well, we're standing right here in the heart of Creative Liverpool and all the plans they have here. In the northeast, the Baltic and the Sage and that area is absolutely thriving. The tech partnerships in Sunderland too. Nottingham Contemporary is one of the great art galleries of the country. And in a sense of people working together in a very joined up way, if those of you who are familiar with West Yorkshire and the Hepworth Gallery, which is also designed, as was Turner Contemporary, by David Chipperfield, what they have achieved there is nothing short of staggering. And right next door to them is Yorkshire Sculpture Park, which is currently doing a fantastic Ai Weiwei show. And you have two artistic organisations that are completely joined up. So when you get to the tourism offer, you have a choice of 2 and more places, the Henry Moore as well, nearby. So there is some fantastic public and private, innovative and entrepreneurial work going on everywhere. I'll just leave you with a few little bullet point thoughts. I don't know how long we have for questions, probably a couple of minutes. So we need entrepreneurship, we need innovation, we need always excellence, we need public engagement, we need civic pride, we need a strong public sector, we need us all to be joined up. None of those are in conflict with each other, and they are all interdependent. If one goes, then the house of cards is threatened. We need strong local roots. Any organisation, no matter where it is in the country, that forgets its local audience and its local origins loses the buy-in. It is the absolute bedrock of any strong institution. At the same time, as I stated earlier, there is absolutely no reason why any organisation strongly rooted in its locality cannot and should not have national and international ambitions. Just a few final points. Knowing your audience and knowing that your audience is constantly changing is an absolute vital part of success. We need to do more. I commend Visit Kent, Visit England, Visit Britain for the work they are doing, but we are really only at the foothills of providing a tourism and visitor offer. We need to be much, much joined up, more joined up digitally. I being the generic visitor, if I want to type in, say for example, I want to go to Nottingham Contemporary, I need a place where I type in Nottingham Contemporary and out comes a site that gives me 10 different options. Do I, in addition, am I interested in heritage? Am I interested in music? Am I interested in visual arts? Am I interested in retail? What kind of food do I want to eat? Where do I want to drink? What kind of hotel do I want to stay? There needs to be a one-stop shop that can create for me a half day, a 1 day, a weekend, or a 1 week stay that will literally join up the dots, that will take me to the booking section of that restaurant, of the bed and breakfast, of the symphony orchestra, of whatever I want to do. It is not beyond the realms that we cannot all work together to produce a national visitor digital space that can provide that. Often artistic institutions think they're actually working in competition with each other. They're not. Actually, what they are, their biggest impediment is not competition, it's lack of information. It's the fact that if I go to continue the example, if I go to Margate, I want to be directed to Canterbury Cathedral, I want to be directed to Sandwich, I want to be directed to the Folkestone Triennial coming up end of August, beginning of September. Plug, plug, you should go. So that's that. We need our taxi drivers and we need our restaurateurs. There was one restaurateur in Margate, I won't name her, who before the gallery was built, was whenever I would go in there, she'd be thoroughly miserable, saying, oh, there's nobody in here, it's all so grim, I'm going to have to close up. And then when the gallery was open and the place was completely heaving, she said, oh God, it's all so busy, I really can't cope. And we just need to remember that everybody who walks into the door of the cafe, of the art gallery, of whatever, they are potentially they're coming in probably for the first time, and they're potentially coming in for the last time. And we've got, if anybody if our eponymous Japanese or Italian visitor to Margate has to wait 15 minutes for a cup of coffee, we've lost them. they're never going to come back again. It's just pure and simple as that. If we can produce international standards, so can everybody else. So we're all here, everybody here involved in tourism, creative industries, culture and arts. We are all at the cutting edge of what everybody around the world thinks is modern Britain. All these different parts are actually part of the same whole, and we embody all of that. We're also at the heart of this debate about intrinsic value versus economic value. The fact is, they are all part of the same value for culture and tourism. The economic case needs consistently to be made, but if a cultural institution does not have intrinsic value, if in and of itself it is not risk-taking, interesting, innovative, exciting, open to all, then it doesn't matter about the jobs that may or may not be created, because eventually people will stop going. So we need to be constantly innovating and looking for excellence in all our cultural institution. The calls on our time, whether we are a local person, whether we are a UK visitor going to a different part of the country, visiting relatives, or just for the sake of it, or whether we're an international visitor, the competition and the calls on our time are intense and growing. And that just brings me back to that final word that we've always used at Margate, which is ambition. Everybody can be as ambitious as the next person. If every cultural institution and if every tourism institution had a zero tolerance for poor service, for poor value, for lack of innovation, and for lack of ambition, then this country will continue to be at the very top of its game. Thank you very much. Continue Sandra's point. If you can't see me, that's all the better, but as long as you can see our two excellent guests, Clara Mercer and Hilary Riva, that would be great. The British Fashion Council, apart from the fantastic work it does promoting British fashion, it is also one of my final plug of the day, founder members of the Creative Industries Federation, and it's absolutely vital that the fashion part, one of the most important parts of UK creative, of what makes Britain what it is very much at the forefront of the debate. But we want to be more specific in the first part of the conversation, and an early warning, we're not going to talk for too long. We're going to open it up to questions, so do please start thinking about the questions that you want to hear about the great British success story that is the fashion industry. Clara, first of all, would you just outline what exactly is London Fashion Week?
I'm not sure how many of you here have been to Fashion Week or know that much about it, but really what it is, it's a huge global event, and it's one of the biggest fashion events that certainly the UK has and the globe has. London is one of the big four, alongside New York, Milan and Paris, and it's really a showcase for designers to show their collections to a primarily trade audience, but increasingly a consumer-facing audience. And it's an opportunity for the fashion industry to get together on a global scale. Outside the catwalk shows, there's also a series of events. There are fringe events that run off schedule, and it's really about getting London to celebrate everything that is fashion, including retail, during that week, which happens twice a year, and that's how we make it stand out on a global scale.
And Hilary is one of the founders. What is the economic benefit of London Fashion Week to UK PLC?
Well, I mean, there's three ways of measuring the actual event itself. One is, of course, the event brings economic value in terms of building the stage, and the people it's bringing brings an audience of 5,000 or so. More importantly are the orders that are taken, because it is a trade event. It's there to sell product, and the estimated orders are circa 200 million per annum. Above and beyond that is it's a massive promotional vehicle for fashion industry and London as a fashion centre, and the estimated add value of that is internationally, which of course is very hard to come by, is over 250 million. So it's a big event, bigger than most sporting events or major news stories. It reaches the globe.
Which answers the point in one of our earlier sessions about additionality. This is money coming to the UK that otherwise would not have come. It is a direct investment in the country.
It is, but I mean, those are the hard economic, as hard as you can get, because measuring, as we heard this morning, is so hard. But it's the soft benefits. I mean, we're launching, London Fashion Week is launching careers. It's launched the careers of Alexander McQueen, of Stella McCartney, recently Erdem and Chris Kane. So it's really about talent. It's about showcasing designers and showcasing talent and creativity, for which London, as we pride ourselves, is, you know, the most creative city in the world.
And members of the audience may not be aware, and Hilary is of far too cruel a disposition to state it herself, that Hilary took London Fashion Week, and you could say the image of British fashion from A to B. A decade or so ago was certainly not in the same place as now. Just walk us through what it was like then and what your view is of what it is now and how you got it from A to B.
Well, first of all, I should say it was a mistake. I didn't know what I was taking on when I did it. I got a random call from a certain Stuart Rose who told me that I was too young to be retired, and offered the job. And I thought it sounded really interesting and really glamorous, and I didn't realise till I got there that it was actually on its last legs. And the British Fashion Council, which everyone thought was this gigantic organisation, was in fact, well, one man and a dog, and I refused to be the dog. So it was, there were three people, and
There's 40 people, so it's grown in that much time.
But at the time, it was coming to terms with the fact that it was a dying event, and that meant, and you said it this morning, it was all about galvanising support, bringing people together. Bringing people together and making the decision that this was not something we wanted to see die, because it could never really have been reborn. So, you know, my role in it was really to galvanise support, actually get some money together, because it was £1 million in debt. And the first thing that happened was that some key supporters, not least our friend Philip Green, wrote a cheque. And then soon after that, we got the amazing support of the Mayor of London. We continue to enjoy that support through. So, and it was the mayoral position rather than the mayor himself, because it was Ken Livingstone who wrote the first cheque, and Boris Johnson who wrote the second one. But that was not, the significant amount was cash raised in sponsorship and the event. And then the professionalism of the event. I mean, it was considered normal as a fashion event for things to run 2 hours late. I share your view of the cup of coffee. You know, if the event isn't the most professional thing, accepting that its audience is there for a purpose and going with that purpose, and the event's no future. After that, it was all down to Clara.
I think the main key things are excellence, making sure that the quality and the standards were world class across the board. The people sitting in that room are the likes of people from Louis Vuitton, from LVMH. They are the best in the world, and making sure that you can prove on a global scale that London is the best in the world. And that everything runs on time. And then it's the storytelling. So basically what Fashion Week is a hotbed of content. You're creating, there are 60 shows, there are 20 presentations, you're filming everything, shooting everything. Then came the digital age, so we had Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, websites were commonplace. So what we did was we built and made a huge amount of content which we churned out to a global marketplace. We were revolutionary in live streaming. We were the first to do that in 2009. We did live Twitter Q&As, and we really spoke to our audience and tried to understand who they were, what they wanted, and then grow that from there. And that is exactly what we do today. But we now do it 365 days a year rather than just surrounding events. And we do that in different parts of the world through multiple channels. We now have big channel documents and spreadsheets that speak to those audiences and with different tone of voice.
And Clara, what is the unique selling point of London Fashion Week as distinct from Paris, Milan, New York, and what is the USP of the British fashion industry?
It's always been known for its creativity, so I think creativity is at the heart of it. It's always mainly thanks to our fantastic colleges being great at emerging talent, and that's been the differentiator for a very long time. What it now has is great creativity supported with great business. So some of the greatest business partnerships, whether that's Angela Angus and Christopher Bailey from Burberry, or Jonathan and Sarah Burton from McQueen, it's being able to marry the two together and create a global business perspective from what is actually an island, and try and make as much noise as you can. And I think that's what we do differently. And I think it's also working with the other creative industries, as you spoke about this morning. We work very closely with BAFTA, we work with the BFI, we work with Sony, and we work with the Brits, and recently in the past Fashion Week we did an event which celebrated all those three things together, which happened in London in the same 2 weeks. So we're quite savvy about doing that, and I think for London it brings a huge amount to the table.
And Hilary, what about the accent of sort of business to consumer? That's obviously a future priority.
Yeah, well, certainly always been recognised this was a trade event, and what the British Fashion Council did very effectively was involve and engage the city. At the beginning, 10 years ago, we had real issues that we were just seen to be causing traffic jams, frankly, and the boroughs were really unhappy about it. And we thought about places like Cannes. Cannes is a trade event for the film industry, but it's celebrated and it's used to define in many ways what the place is all about, and engage people who live there in total. So that meant obviously expanding it into retail. But London Fashion Weekend is an event that allows people access to a part of what it's all about, and that's got to be the future. I know Clara says it's a future priority for them.
And given that we're in Liverpool and we're in the Northwest, final question before we put it out to others' questions. How do we harness all the great designer and creative talents that want to move into fashion or are already in fashion from across the UK, both within the localities and bringing to London Fashion Week and just more generally supporting the industry across the island?
I mean, I think that London is the gateway, really, to the whole of the UK. And we have to compete on a global scale, which is why we use London as our flagship. But then the stories that we tell, we very much talk about British fashion. And that's British fashion, whether it's here, whether it's abroad, whether it is manufacturing in the southwest, whether it is Nottingham and being the home of shoemaking. And we champion that throughout. And I think it's really just, building brands for yourself is so doable these days with the digital age. So start building your own brand and keep on building it, and then using events like London Fashion Week to get you that global reach.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that as well. When we talk about British designers, they're not born in Britain. These are people, and Fashion Week itself is full of international. They're people who've chosen to come to Britain, and they've come here for either to study, but because they know that this is a great place to set up business. And this is where the support will be and the ability to shine. So it's about London, it's about Britain, but it is entirely multicultural. And these are, they are British-based designers, not British designers. And in the same way as British designers go abroad to Milan or New York, and they're still supported by the British Fashion Council, but they're choosing to drive their businesses abroad.
And my very final question, we're obviously here under the aegis of the Tourism Society. We're talking to an audience that is predominantly based in and around tourism, and we're talking about cultural and creative tourism. What are the learnings, what are the ways that the tourism industry can liaise with the fashion industry and with London Fashion Week? What more needs to be done on both sides to make it really harmonious?
Well, I'm a retailer, so one of the major cultural activities that goes on, and I know it's not necessarily, is shopping. And we know, 80-odd% of people visited coming to London say they're coming for the cultural activities, of which fashion is a key part, but it's much broader than that, and it is about the markets, it's about the stores. I saw some recent information about the number 3 in the list of key tourist dreams for internationals was to go to Harrods. So I think fashion is embedded, as all the creative and cultural parts of. And sure, Americans come to London, for example, mainly for heritage, but then they go and see the rest, and obviously it's about the theatre, but it's about the whole spectrum of what a city or a country has to offer. So from a fashion perspective, it's a key part of the story.
And we speak primarily to the key opinion formers, so they are the head press and the head buyers all the way around the world, and we give them lists of what are the key things to do while they're here, what should they not miss, what is new, and then that all gets fed back, around the world, what's going on.
Yeah.
Good. Hands up. Questions? Sorry, I thought I was a hand up there at the back. Yeah, in the middle. There, in the middle row, about 2/3 of the way back, and then who would like to be the second questioner? Yeah, Sandra in the. Oops, sorry. It was down here. It was down. You got the back as well. Did I miss any hands in the back?
Hello.
Right.
Chris Evans from the tourism company. Fashion Week is obviously a success story. I was just wondering, to what extent, you said that you had a very rocky start, to what extent did the public sector support that change? And is this a lesson we can draw on for other, to encourage more public sector support for tourism?
Do you want to go for it?
At the beginning, there was no public sector support, actually. That's technically untrue. UKTI have always supported Fashion Week with a programme to bring in key buyers, so part of the business programme. There was a tiny amount of London-based support. Really, London Fashion Week is built on sponsorship, so I think it's really about the scale of the event and the power of the event. So number one, funding is sponsorship. Number two is the event itself in terms of revenues it gets, and then public sector financing. Where they do put a lot of effort is into the business building side and skills, which is outside of the events itself. But the support, particularly of the Mayor's Culture team, and I've got Mike sitting on the front row, staring at me, so I commend to you, if anyone who's, a lot of you are actually directly in the industry, read the cultural strategy of the cultural agency London. It's a fantastic document, and they got it. They just got why London Fashion Week was important, and central government, other than the UKTI, just didn't. So thanks to the leadership of.
Do they get it a bit more now or not?
Absolutely, they get it now.
Yeah.
But it's still a challenge. It's not easy running, and we have the European Development Fund who also give us funding, but they're very good for starting things, but then to maintain that you have to have your own revenue streams and you have to have match funding from corporates, otherwise it's so hard to maintain.
But I saw something last year about cities are driving the future. City governments, whether that be in the US and certainly here. So it was really good this morning to hear obviously what's happened in Liverpool, what will happen in Hull. It's down to it. I think it's the cities that will take the lead in the next, however, 50 years, 100 years, it will be about that, not central government.
Right, we've got time for a couple more questions. Let's go here first. Any more questions? Sandra would like to ask a question, but given that she's the host. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll go there and then we'll go Sandra. Thanks.
Hi, thanks. Great presentation there. Just interested, what next? Sorry, I'm Nick Bodger, City of London. What next for London Fashion Week? How are you building it further?
Well, it's a constant development. As I mentioned briefly, the consumer-facing angle of it is very interesting and important to us. That's not least because nowadays brands must have a direct-to-consumer relationship, and whether that is online, offline, whether it is bricks and mortar, that's very important. That's a big development. And then I think the other thing is around content. So how can we help the event grow and show content in different ways? So how can you showcase in new ways using technology or not? And how can you reach a broader audience? Growth, mainly. That's the big aim, is to grow it as big as we can, to make as much noise as we can, and preferably overtake our competitors one day.
Thank you, Hilary. I'm interested in startup because I've been involved myself in a sort of startup for the last 10 years with Visit Kent, sort of not quite as successful perhaps as London Fashion Week, but in some of the same ingredients. If you could sort of pick one or two tipping points where you thought, yes, this is going to work, whether conversations or whatever, what would you highlight to us so that gives us a clue and gives us all faith that if you've got a great idea, you can make it work?
Well, $6 million question. I think I just go back to it's really about bringing all the constituents together because you can leverage them. And I think actually pointing, I would be saying this if he wasn't sitting there. I think within the culture team in the Mayor's department, they understand how to leverage. And whether this is business or an event, maybe Clara can tell you a little bit about men's, because that started with a big, ambitious idea, and then a team of people got together and tell the story of men's.
So it was part of our legacy for 2012, and we launched the first ever London Men's Fashion Week, which was based on a demand, really, that we had fantastic creative talent. But our ambition was not just to start a small fashion week and grow it, but was to create a global event that was the biggest and the best men's fashion week around there. And our strapline was that London was the home of menswear, which is based around Savile Row. And we launched the first event, and we had a committee of people, which had everyone from David Walliams to Dylan Jones to Tiny Temper, and we got the right people involved. And through that network of people, which spanned a lot of different consumer groups, we built an event effectively within 2 years, and it is now one of the biggest events in London. It has a huge reputation, and it's already outgrown its kind of place. And so now we need to drive that forward again to grow that again. But it's a huge success story, and that was about, as Hilary said, getting the right people involved, having a huge ambition, telling everyone what it is, and getting everyone else to help support it and make it happen. And you've got to have the talent, so it's getting the designers buy-in in the first place. But it's coming up in 2 weeks' time, and so Burberry are going to be there, DKNY will be there, Tommy Hilfiger is around. These are all international brands that, until 2 seasons ago showed abroad, and that's happened very quickly. And it's getting their buy-in is the main thing.
To add to that, I guess you can't build it on nothing.
No. Yeah.
So we used, with London Fashion Week in London, we used the creativity because we knew we were number 4. We were number 4 heading out the door. But the one thing we could say was London is the most creative city in the world, and has the most creative talent. The menswear thing is again very clear. We did invent menswear. We just did. I mean, it's a long time ago now. But if you start from that premise and then build on it, it's got to be true. But then you've got to tell a story that works and amplify, I think. I think it's that, content, amplify, and bring potentially disparate forces together, some with the money and some not.
So I hope we've had some interesting discussion and indications around what has made London Fashion Week what it is now. We've heard about vision, we've heard about ambition, we've heard absolutely vitally the beginning and end, which is creativity. But we've also heard quite a lot about joined-upness and persistence, and the public sector working with the private sector entrepreneurially, and never resting on its laurels, always looking to move ahead, always mindful of the competition just on the other side of the door. So I hope a lot of those points are transferable in all our discussions about all the other sectors that make up the creative industries, and also the interrelation between those creative industries and our tourism sector, which is the purpose of today's conference. So with that, please thank Hilary, Riva and Clara Mercer, and thanks very much for listening.